right when you get that ring on your finger, especially if you've been anticipating it for a while, all of the advice and information and inspiration and opinions just kind of start flowing in at you. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. If you get wrapped up in that and you try to do this all at once, that wedding planning overwhelm is gonna start sneaking in, and it usually doesn't go away. Hey blushing brides, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who just got engaged over the holidays and you're new here, welcome, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. This is such an exciting time and this is gonna be so fun. I'm Kyle James and I used to be a full service wedding planner, and now I make videos like this helping brides like you plan the wedding of their dreams. So if you are engaged and you are working on planning your wedding, or maybe you're a wedding planner or somebody in the industry and these videos are helpful to you, make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss my new wedding planning and wedding design videos every week. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 12 tips for actually enjoying your engagement, getting to soak in all this excitement, and smoothly entering into the wedding planning process. So let's get started. Tip number 1 is to get that ring insured ASAP. You do not want to be walking around with that ring on your finger if it's not insured. It's really easy to do. You just add it onto your homeowner's or renter's insurance policy. So just contact your insurance company and they'll help you get that added on there. You just want to have that peace of mind that in case you lose it, it would be all right. It would not be fun, obviously, but just having it insured and knowing that it would be covered kind of helps you be able to actually enjoy wearing the ring more, because you're not always worried in the back of your mind that you might lose it. Along with that one, make sure that you get it fitted ASAP as well, especially if it's too big. You do not want to be walking around with a loose ring on your finger. If it is going to be a while before you can get it fitted for whatever reason, they have like little inserts that you can just order on Amazon to make it fit on your finger, but do not walk around wearing a too big ring because that is the best way to lose it. So don't do that. Tip number 2 is do not feel pressure to set a date. The first question everyone starts asking is, when are you getting married? What's your date? Don't feel pressured to come up with an answer right away. You can just tell them and tell yourself, we're just enjoying the buzz and the excitement from our engagement for right now, and then we're gonna start planning in a little while. That kind of will help push people off a little bit and buy you some time so that you don't have to start thinking about that right away. It is fun to start planning and to like start getting things locked down. That's a lot of fun, but it can kind of feel stressful if you like just got engaged and you're like already jumping in and trying to figure out a date just so that you can tell people when they ask you. So don't feel pressured, just tell them we're enjoying our engagement right now and we will let you know if you're invited and what our date is. And that brings me to my next tip, number 3, do not promise any guest invites. It's like impossible to not talk about getting engaged and about the wedding and stuff, like at your office or with pretty much everyone, because that's what everyone's going to want to talk to you about. But just make sure that you're not promising any invites. You can just tell them, we're not sure how many people we're gonna be able to invite, and if you are invited, we'll let you know. So if you start promising people invites or like playing along with the people who assume that they're invited, and then you decide later that you want a much smaller, more intimate wedding, you're gonna have to cut the people who are closer to you or who you would rather have there off of your list to accommodate for all the people that you promised. Or you're gonna have to tell people that you promised no later on. It's much harder to tell somebody yes and then like go back on it than it is to just not invite them in the first place. So be sure you really keep like zipped lips about who's invited and who's not until you have your guest list finalized. My next tip kind of goes along with that one as well, and that is do not promise any bridal party seats. This one is actually probably more important. You do not want to promise anyone a bridal party seat until you have 100% picked out your bridal party, who you want, how many people you want up there, so that you don't have to go back on your word later. Same with if you promise people they're invited and then you have to tell them later they're not. This is actually a lot harder and more dramatic if you tell people they're gonna be in your bridal party, and then you decide later on that you want a smaller bridal party, or something happens and they're not in your bridal party anymore, it's gonna be much harder to tell them no after you've already told them yes. So even if you know somebody is like 100% gonna be in it, don't promise any bridal party invites until you're actually ready to send out those bridal party asks. Tip number 5 is to start a Pinterest board. I know most of you probably already have one, and if you're anything like me, you've had one since you were like 16 or since Pinterest even came into existence. But that board is probably so full of random stuff that actually using it to try to plan is gonna be overwhelming. So what you wanna do is start a completely new board. I have an entire video on the best way to set this up and organize it. I'll link it below, but you really wanna set up a new board fresh from the start, and you can go through that old board and add inspiration that still speaks to you if there's any on there, but you really wanna have like your actual wedding planning board so that it's not full of random ideas that you've thought of over the years. It's just specifically focused on the vision and the actual wedding that you want right now. My next tip is to find out what is important to your partner and how involved they want to be in the wedding planning process. Every bride that I've worked with has been surprised at some detail that was way more important to their partner than they thought it would be. Instead of assuming that you know that they don't want to be involved, or like that everything's not important to them or whatever, just sit down and ask them like, hey, is there anything specific that you really want at our wedding? How involved do you want to be in this process? How much time do you have to spend on this, and how involved do you want to be? And be really open and really actually listening to them. I think this is the piece that can make your wedding either help your relationship or hurt your relationship. If you open up that communication right at the beginning and you truly listen to and care about what's important to your partner and try to incorporate that and work together, then your wedding planning process is going to bring you closer together. But if you're like ignoring that or just assuming you already know and not listening, it can definitely cause tension in the relationship, which is not something that we want when we are just starting out our marriage. So don't do that. Make sure that you are asking them what's important to them and how involved they want to be. My next tip for engaged couples is to decide who you want to be involved in your wedding planning process. Sit down with your partner, and after you talk to them about what they want to do and how involved they want to be, figure out who else you might want to have involved in the process, or who might want to be involved in the process. Making this decision up front can make things a lot easier for you later on. There might be people who kind of come in with like a lot of opinions or really wanting to take control of the process. And if you set the expectation and then like communicate with them up front, like, hey, I don't want that much help in the process, or I really need a lot of help in this process, whatever it might be from that person, setting those expectations up front can make things a lot easier. Even if like you don't want somebody to be as involved, but you tell them up front and then they're starting to get too involved, it makes it a little bit easier later on to be like, hey, remember I said I don't really want that much involvement. And then along with this one, I talk about this in my wedding planning workshop, I'll link it below, when you're doing the budget. If you are accepting money from people for your wedding, they are going to expect to have more say in your wedding than if you decide not to. So when you are accepting money, you need to decide if it's more important to you to have more control and have less involvement from people, or if it's worth it to you to accept the money and accept the input. It's totally okay either way, as long as you're like consciously and intentionally making that decision and you make it up front and then communicate with everyone who is going to be involved. My newly engaged tip number 8 is to decide when you want to start the wedding planning process. I recommend like just picking a date and putting it on the calendar for when you want to start this process, so that you can just sit back and truly enjoy your engagement without people being like, well, when are you deciding? When are you starting? What are you doing? You're like, hey, we picked a date, like on this date, we are going to start thinking about all this. But until then, we're not talking about any of it, we're just enjoying the engagement. I feel like that takes the pressure off you as a couple as well. You're not so like feeling, I don't know, you kind of feel rushed or like pressure to get started if you don't have that date. But just knowing that there's a day when you are ready to start and you're gonna dive in, I feel like will make you be able to actually enjoy the engagement enjoy that pre-wedding planning buzz a little bit more, because you're not like, oh, when are we gonna start? What are we doing? Where do we start? It doesn't feel so overwhelming. So pick that start planning date and get that on your calendar. Tip number 9 is to start a joint calendar system with your partner. If you haven't done this already, you really need to have a way to be able to book time with each other. The best way to do it, and I think the easiest way, is just to do it through Google Calendar and then just add each other on the invites. So whether it's like wedding planning things or little wedding celebrations or just whatever you have going on, it's so much easier when you can have it on both of your calendars and you have like a one clear system of communication for these important dates. So no one's gonna miss an appointment, things aren't gonna get double booked, etc. This obviously will be something that you'll use like the rest of your lives pretty much, especially if you're planning on having kids. Just having this joint system where you know where to check if you are booking something and you have a clear communication about everything that's going on just will help your relationship and help your life. So figure out what system works best for you, whether it's a paper calendar or whatever app you want to use. Like I said, I recommend Google. It's the easiest for me, but just get it started as soon as possible so that when you do start booking those appointments, you just put it on both of your calendars and then nobody forgets and nothing gets double booked. Engagement tip number 10 is to watch my Wedding Planning 101 workshop first before you do anything else. It's completely free. It's here on YouTube. I'll link it below. And it also includes 22 free wedding planning worksheets. So that date that you marked on your calendar to start wedding planning, on that day, you're gonna grab your partner and you're gonna sit down and watch that free workshop and complete those free worksheets. They'll walk you through really picking the theme and scheme and vibe of how you want the wedding to go. It walks you through picking your date, and then it also walks you through creating and allocating your budget. Don't start doing anything until you have these 3 things figured out, or else you'll just be playing catch up the whole time and it can feel extremely overwhelming. One of the things I see happen a lot is couples get so excited, they got that ring, they want to start shopping for venues so they can get their date and get that all booked, but they don't set their budget or their vision or any of this first. And then they end up booking a venue that's way too expensive, and then you never really end up being able to save in other places. Everyone says like, oh, it's fine, we'll just do everything else really cheaply. It really doesn't work like that. If you book an expensive venue, then they have expensive vendors that you have to work with, and it all ends up more expensive. So don't do that. Don't go even shop venues, don't shop dresses, don't do anything until you know your budget so that you can be sure that you're shopping in your budget. I have a saying that I use all the time, and it's like, don't test drive the Porsche if you're in the market for the Honda, because the Honda is going to be great and it's going to have all the features that you want and it's going to be perfect for you, unless you just went to the Porsche dealership first and you see what that one has and what that looks like and what that feels like. Then the Honda is going to not seem so great, right? So we don't want to shop outside our budget, because then when it comes time to shop in your budget, it just doesn't seem as awesome because it's just less expensive. Like, more money buys more options, and you know. So don't do that. Make sure you go watch that workshop before you do anything. If you've already started things, that's totally okay. Stop what you're doing and go watch that workshop. I'll link it below for you. And then, like I said, it comes with 22 free worksheets, so make sure that you're getting those done so that you can just get super organized and lay out everything up front and start wedding planning on the right foot. My next tip for newly engaged couples is to get organized right from the start. This is a wedding planning binder, and this is going to be your best friend. I have an entire video that walks you through what's in my binder, and I can link that below as well. It's so important to start this right away, right up front. Get super organized and know what you need to be doing and when. The wedding planning process can feel so overwhelming because there are just so many details and so much going on. And if you're just trying to do it all at once and you do a little bit here, a little bit there, and you have like files floating everywhere, it's just gonna be overwhelming, stressful, and dramatic, and not enjoyable at all. So the first thing that you wanna do is get your wedding planning binder. So I have an entire Ultimate Wedding Planning Workbook that's over 160 pages of wedding planning worksheets that walk you through step by step the entire process and help you just like get organized and lay everything out. So I talk more about this in my wedding planning workshop. So do the workshop first and get those worksheets and just kind of get started. But then you'll definitely want to start your wedding planning binder. Put those free worksheets in there first, and then go ahead and grab my Ultimate Wedding Planning Workbook so that you can stay organized throughout the whole process and you know what to be doing, when to be doing it, and how to do it. I will link all of this below. My next tip, I kind of already mentioned it, but I just want to be very clear. Do not buy anything for the wedding until you have completed your vision and your budget. Do not go start spending money. I know it can be super exciting and you just want to get started. I totally know how that feels, but if you start booking things without knowing the vision and without like being organized and having a clear idea of what's going on, it's going to be a lot harder to get the other pieces to fit and to get other things to work in your budget if you do that. So I know it's exciting. If you want to buy something, get your binder, put it together. It's a whole project. It'll be so fun, and that will kind of satiate you until you decide to really sit down and start the wedding planning process. And then one more tip for you to make this whole process so much easier is to start practicing taking advice and information from family and friends very lightly. Wedding planning is one of those things where everybody has an opinion of how it should be done. Everybody thinks they know what you want, and everybody, like, I don't know, they just have no filter basically. Especially if you have friends who are like currently planning a wedding or recently got married. They're like, well, this is how we did that, or this is how you have to do that. It can be super overwhelming, especially if it's like a completely different style from yours. So you don't have to be rude, you don't have to tell them to not tell you stuff, but just practice being like, oh, that's so cool that you did that, and then like decide if that piece of advice or information is relevant to your wedding, and then if it is, you can incorporate it, but if it's not, then you can just drop it. But you don't, like I said, you don't have to be rude or like cut them off or anything. You can just listen, but just know that any piece of wedding advice or information, you get to decide if that's something you want to incorporate. There's no like wedding planning Bible or anything, unfortunately. There's no one right way to do this, and everybody's weddings are going to be completely different. So it's great to have information and have support, but also make sure that you are filtering it for what's important to you and what's relevant to you, so that you're not like overwhelmed and stressed out by like trying to make everyone else happy. So there you have it, 13 hopefully super helpful tips for actually enjoying your engagement and for smoothly easing into this wedding planning process. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Also share it with your other newly engaged friends. If you aren't already, be sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss any of my upcoming wedding planning content. I will link that Wedding Planning 101 workshop below with the free worksheets. Make sure you do that on the day that you are ready to start wedding planning. And if you're ready to start today, go do that next. Go do it right now. But make sure you do that first, because it will just help so much in getting everything organized and kind of coming up with an overall goal and vision, so that you can start wedding planning on the right foot and you start off organized and with a clear vision and goal in mind. I will also link the Unveiled Ultimate Wedding Planner Workbook below as well. If you want to grab that, get it. It's an instant download. You get it instantly, so you can just print it off and start your wedding planning binder. That can be really fun to get that put together, and it's just so important to be organized from the start. It's super helpful, so I'll link that below as well. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited to have you here. Congrats again. This is gonna be so fun. We'll see you next time. Happy planning.
I watch you as you drive. Do you know I'm looking? And I can't help but smile. Do you know how much I love you? You put my favorite song on, I put my feet up, and we just sing along. And I can't help but feeling, just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever? I'm loving this moment. Can we stay here together? If I could stop the time, don't you know that I would? 'Cause I'm just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever?